it doesn't have to face me.
It needs to face you. It loves you.
So I think...
Loves you.
So I think for the first time in our friendship, Katie actually almost hit me. We're sitting in the car, and
not talking to you.
I was like talking about how like I think I'm the straight man.
Mm-hmm.
And her dog just sneezed, so that was a dog sneeze. Merry Christmas.
Bless you, Kaylee. Still can't have my sandwich.
You know, I'm okay with being the straight man because I would be Dean Martin. And she goes, yeah, you'd be the, which Mark brother was it?
And I have to run through them, so it's Groucho, Harpo, Chico, Zeppo. You'd be Zeppo.
She said Gummo at first.
No. Gummo's the fifth one.
Not that movie.
Yeah, no. So you run through it, it's Groucho, Harpo, Chico, Zeppo, and then Gummo's the one that you don't usually acknowledge because he wasn't in the movies, but he did the vaudeville with them. He turned into a movie producer. And then Zeppo was the straight man, and he started leaving off in their later films, like The Big Store and stuff like that. So it turned into just the three. But when they first started in the movie industry, when they were going from their plays to the movies, because that's how Duck Soup and everything went, they had Zeppo, and Zeppo was the straight man. It turned into... I want to say Madeleine Albright, and that is obviously wrong. But, you know,
she's a little old to have been in the Marx Brothers.
Yeah, whatever. The stone-faced woman from Night at the Opera, and I can't remember her name. Somebody email me later. I could IMDb it if I was really...
The Queen album?
Shut it. So anyway, that was my diatribe.
And I'm just, like, rocking back and forth and thinking of the film Gummo. Don't watch it.
Don't.
You'll...
You need your eyeballs. And
I
your
literally
sanity.
did not get out of bed for 3 days. And then I looked at her and I said, you know, I haven't actually watched a Marx Brothers film since I was like a small child.
I'm not talking to you anymore.
And
this is going to be a really dull podcast because I refuse to acknowledge her existence.
She just stared at me for literally like 5 minutes, and it's like, have you ever seen like a pissed off, like, what is it, a Boston Terrier, where they just like blow up its mouth flaps in like frustration? I kind of had a flashback to my friends. Rest in peace, Archie.
I think you just called me a bug-eyed Boston Terrier.
Well, you know, you're a ginger, so that's like the general...
No, that makes me soulless. It doesn't make me bug-eyed.
You own a Kia Soul. You have a soul.
I have paid that sucker off, too.
Good job. Just in time to be unemployed. Merry
Woo!
Christmas.
Hey, anybody got job?
Jobs! She's about to get a job through the podcast.
I'm bound and determined for this to happen, y'all.
I think that the podcast, like, will pay itself off before that will happen, but, like... We've made like $10 on YouTube, guys. Thank you for your generous commercial watching.
Oh, we appreciate that.
Especially because it's usually like the same commercial like 14,000 times, and by the end of it you want to like hunt down whoever came up with it and slaughter them.
The point is...
We appreciate you.
The other point is...
Vanessa's a horrible person who you should never try to emulate.
Because she hasn't seen the Marx Brothers since she was a child. How can you... Like, it's on AMC all the freaking time.
I have not had television since 2010.
It's on Netflix!
I live with someone who won't watch movies that were made after 1970.
Watch him. He's the genius who chews on himself. Really?
He is. This is the man who, when I told him we were covering Steve McQueen in my abstract cinema class, he thought I meant the old, like, Steve McQueen movies, and he wanted to come to class and watch it on the, like, projector with me. It was that artistic Steve McQueen that made the film about the Irish IRA bomber who starved to death in jail in protest. I'm really actually kind of sorry I didn't make TJ sit through that.
Oh my god.
When I had to write a paper on Fellini, I thought he was gonna die. That's marriage. It's an institution.
Marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today.
Now you're just making me think of Bernie Sanders and I'm getting sad.
It's It's from The Princess Bride, and I can't talk to you anymore.
I never liked The Princess Bride. And I've told you that before.
I don't care.
However, you were the person when we worked together at the knife store, when you said lock the door, and I said, and hope they don't have blasters, you had no idea what I was talking about because you had never seen Star Wars.
There were reasons.
I have met your dad. This. I have met... Yeah, I'm surrounded by so much Star Wars stuff, it's obscene.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I have reasons for not saying it. They were poor reasons, and they have been rectified.
We won't even get into Highlander or Gambit. I know you got nerd cred. Calm down. She was also talking about Loki 4 early. We're a nerdy girl. I can't say I'm a whole lot better. I just pretend to be cool. And that's why I'm Dean Martin.
My nerd girl heart.
That's why I am Dean Martin and you're Jerry Lewis. Hey, you have a very successful telethon.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, call now to support the Katie Gibbs Unemployment Fund. Really, I could use that. So anyway, so this is ArtIswear. I'm Katie Gibbs.
I'm Vanessa, horrible human being Van Alstyne.
Night at the opera one night, and you will cancel out your life debt of this.
Okay.
I have it on DVD.
No, I was just thinking I kind of want to see Duck Soup because I saw that Sacha Baron Cohen film, but
yeah, I've got that too.
Yeah, I know you got me covered.
And The Thin Man, William Powell, Myrna Loy.
We did watch that one together. That was good. I didn't even know who they were.
Whole series. They're beautiful together. Seriously, y'all. I need to do an old movie podcast on that.
There we go. You can educate me. I did watch a bunch of this stuff when I was a kid, but my mother was such a stoner, I don't remember it. Because it turns out that smoking pot around your kids, getting them high so they shut up and go to bed, that's bad for them.
What? Note to self.
Yeah, don't.
Anywho, so, long anecdotes aside, we're still running the Christmas card contest, where, what is it, the first 5 people who send us an address to
It doesn't matter what address.
Yeah, the first 5 people who send us an address and a name to artiswear@gmail.com will send you a Christmas card. Specify if you want it funny, obscene, fangirl nerdy. I got you covered there.
No nudes.
No nudes.
And if it says something like Jennifer Lawrence and the address is Hollywood, California, don't ask us to send bomb threats.
Yeah, no bomb threats. We are also not sending any substances through the mail. Use your own judgment.
Katie will lick the envelope because I hate doing that. Yeah, spit.
I'll lick it good.
Stay away from me.
Aside from that, today we're starting kind of a new...
We're experimenting. It's like we're in our first years of college again, speaking of illicit substances. And we just kind of we're podcast curious, and we'd like to get together with you, kind of hook up and see if you're podcast curious too, so that maybe we'll know if we like this kind of podcast. So let's experiment, baby.
What we're doing is we're going to start kind of a new series every once in a while where we just take a snapshot of a year or a decade and see what kind of artwork is being created around the globe. Not just Eurocentric, but tribal and Asian and all those things that aren't generally covered in your Survey 1 art history book.
Snapshot around the world, around the world, around the world, around the... Don't sue me, Daft Punk.
They're gonna do it.
They're just gonna hate sue me because it was so bad.
So, the year that Vanessa picked is about 1935?
Yeah,
is that where we're at?
Within 10 years of 1935. Why is it not exactly 1935? Things in your life, they just don't always work out the way you want them. You try to be real specific, but then it turns out sometimes that's impossible. So
sometimes it turns out you can get pregnant on birth control.
Wait. Well, twice, yeah.
No, just the... Yes. Damn it. And that's where the Marx Brothers come in, because that's when they were starting to put their films out as late 1920s, early 1930s, and then they carried on into the 40s, something like that. And then the Thin Man started in the 30s and went to the 40s.
If you've ever played Fallout 4, you know how you're, like, default named if you're the chick Nora, and you later are, like, with Nick Valentine? That is Nick and Nora. It's a Thin Man reference. Now you can sound like a real sophisticated mofos, because you're like, 1930s, Myrna Loy and
William Powell
were like Nick and Nora, and like, blah, 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 blah. There you go. They were detectives.
They were Nick and Nora Charles, and the series was the first one was based off the Maltese Falcon, written by Dashiell Hammett. And it turned into a 6-movie series, and they just have wonderful chemistry together, and they're dry and witty and sarcastic. And please, if any of y'all are fans, just email the crap out of me, because I love them.
Now I'm going to make her really hate me. I have never seen a Spencer Tracy film. Okay, I see how that goes. Alright, so
where are we starting?
Well, let's spin the globe, Katie.
Around the world in 30 days. We'll start here.
So yeah, we point our pointer fingers. The globe spins. Oh, North Africa. So, looks like we landed on the Bangwa Kingdom. That's what the pronunciation webpage told me it sounds like. This is the continent that has a city named Djibouti, or a country named Djibouti. Yeah, so don't even start.
We're doing our best here. We're not trying to upset anybody.
Yeah, please don't think I'm being rude on purpose. It's always accidental. I'm an accidental a-hole. Stop shaking your head no. So this piece that we're looking at is, I think that in reality it's probably like 2 or 3 feet tall, like the measurements, and 34 inches tall. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's like 3 feet. Yeah. It's a lanky female figurine with abstracted proportions. Her breasts are kind of melon-like. She's holding a stick and a flask. Her feet are still kind of carved into the wooden base. Her features have like very exaggerated almond eyes, a pinched-in flat nose. Her teeth don't really have the separation between them, and the edge of the ear kind of comes out, it sticks out a little bit, and it's more like a C than a like ear shape. It's attributed to a master carver named Ateu-Atsa, or Atsa, or yeah, I can't even, I'm not even...
Please check our show notes for names.
He's a carver from the early 20th century, and I've heard him spoken about when it comes to like African art history before. And what happens in this period is a lot of the statues are named after who commissioned them and not the artist. There are points in everyone's art history where that's not that weird.
Okay.
Medieval sculptors, there's a lot of them we don't know who they were. What happens in this period, though, is this part of Africa that's like Benin and Cameroon and Nigeria, it's the part of Africa that most people that are African American actually descend from. The Dahomey people in particular, there's a really good Stuff You Missed in History class podcast that covers how they were slave exporters. Now, the fact that this happened through Africa from black people, let's not use that against people of color. I don't think they knew how bad those people were going to have it when they were shipped off.
Right.
But that's kind of this cultural period.
It was the spoils of war thing.
Yeah, and this is a very advanced civilization. When
Right.
it comes to Northern Africa, and I've said this before in the Mayan podcast, we tend to think of them, we either don't acknowledge that they're not European, like Morocco and Egypt, or we think of them as like really backwards and ridiculous.
It took me until much longer than I would like to admit to realize that Egyptian people were not white.
They're African, or not Middle
Right.
Eastern is what
Middle Eastern and African. It took me so long. That's stupid.
It's ridiculous. But this part of West Africa has always been really advanced, is where I'm going with this. And in the 30s in particular, they're both producing these very well-carved, advanced, abstract sculptures. And we've discovered, well, a German archaeologist in particular has discovered a dig in Benin specifically that produces statues that are bronze metal casts that are way more advanced than anything we had during what would have been like 9th century Europe. They retained the knowledge that had been created by like the Greeks and Romans and like really the whole Mediterranean region and North African about sculpture, and became like abstract and much more thoughtful long before Europe. Because Europe slid backwards.
Right. Well, and what was it? So all the knowledge came from Greece and from the Byzantine era. Before the churches came in and burned everything, all those libraries, the Library of Alexandria and everything, that went to Africa and Egypt, I think, particularly, where some of those books went. If I remember this correctly, I don't even remember where this is from. But that's why they still had those advancements you had from ancient Greece and ancient Rome and stuff like that, where Europe was denied access to all of that knowledge because of the church. Thank you very much.
Well, and Muslim cultures, to their credit, have always been like, why would you get rid of learning?
Exactly, and that's why they kept everything and saved it. And so that's why they were so far advanced, and then the Europeans just had stronger bacterial systems.
Yeah, with, like, extremist groups like ISIS aside, because there's extremists with whatever you're doing.
Irish. Northern Ireland!
Yeah, getting back to Steve McQueen.
Don't hate me.
Yeah, extremist groups exist for everybody.
Right.
They exist for everybody. It's not...
Right. But except for them, you were going with something about Muslims, extremist groups aside, something.
You know, most of Islam is actually, like, very thoughtful and ahead of our modern culture, or was ahead of our modern culture for the day, is what I'm trying to say, in, like, 9th century.
Right.
Whatever. So these, and what happens also when these digs by the Germans in, like, Benin and Nigeria and Cameroon come about, they're attributed to Europeans because the Germans did not think that the Africans were intelligent enough to have created these sculptures, so they were both, like, hidden and misattributed, and it's only been in the last, like, 20 to 15 years that they've really gone back and looked at these and rethought them. So what you're seeing here is a fairly abstracted, but what we would call at the time primitive piece of work. Has a long history in abstraction and thinking about these sculptural objects that do have a religious significance as something that has a lot of, like, symbolism and removal from reality with purpose. Whereas I would classify something as, quote, primitive if those are unintentional because of lack of skill.
So that line of thinking that the Germans had, where they would attribute it to Europeans as opposed to the actual people who created it, is that the same people who think that aliens built the pyramids?
Now, these are the same people that thought, hey, let's stick a bunch of those minorities we don't like on trains and kill them in the millions. Because their brains are too small to keep up with our, like, great Judeo-Christian white minds.
You mean the super Aryan, super
Nazi scumbag pieces of crap.
Yeah.
Sorry if you're a Nazi scumbag piece of crap.
Why
Think
are you
about your life
listening to
decisions.
us?
Think about your life decisions. It's okay, brother. It's okay to love sweet chocolate skin.
Oh, creepy.
And one of the reasons I brought up Ateu-Atsa, and this piece is actually unidentified. They're not sure that he did it, but it's very similar to a piece that Man Ray owned that he called the Bangwa Queen. And, you know, there is this tendency with, quote, tribal cultures to attribute their royal figures as always being queens and princesses, so I look at that title with a little bit of skepticism, but it does tend to be the royal families that commission them, so maybe that's accurate. But this shows that, number one, in the 1930s, North African in particular art is being looked at by artists. And I even mentioned Pablo Picasso for Europe, his Cubist piece, Girl Before a Mirror March, because you can see the North African mask influence in the faces of his early Cubist work, or his later Cubist work.
And you can see the patterning used, too, is also African-inspired. And the way that he's abstracting. I mean, it's a clear derivative.
And the Man Ray picture is a statue similar to this one. It's better intact, and she seems to have some kind of hat on. And she's in a crouching stance, whereas the other one was erect. Snicker, snicker. And there is a nude flapper woman who I wonder if she's not part African-American. I can't tell from the photo. But she's got, like, the finger curls and a bob. She has a sachet over her
naughty
hip
bits.
region, and a lot like Mapplethorpe's photography in the 1980s. It's very, like, thick black and white, so that the contrast of her very, like, pale skin or paler skin stands out against the statue, and there's a shadow cast on the wall so that light and dark become a very big part of this narrative.
I'm so glad you're here to sound smart. Because what she said.
I practice in the mirror at night.
I'm glad somebody does.
So we did mention Picasso's Girl Before a Mirror from March 1932 as being the European piece we're going to talk about. So we have this East African abstract statue that I think makes a lot of sense against the Picasso. The Picasso is very brightly colored, though that would be on things that are painted. A lot of African work is very brightly colored. And it has that kind of, like, melon-looking boob quality. The stomach's very, like, rounded. The face has a mass quality, and it's divided on the day self and kind of divided but more obscured on the, like, night side, which is within the mirror. And, like the Man Ray photograph, you have the, like, contrast of, like, the brighter self against the darker self.
Right.
It's all in geometrics. It's a very simplified form. But what's interesting here is that you have this person who comes from traditional Western art history, like Pablo Picasso. His early work, like his Blue Period, is all very real with, like, a kind of a slight surrealist edge, but that's not intentional. Intentionality is part of a mature artist, if any of y'all are wondering. But he's looking at this abstract African art that has existed in place for centuries, and then making what's a revolution in Europe. So when people talk about, like, world economies, I always kind of, like, laugh and think about stuff like that, because it's been more isolated, but we have never been an island unto ourselves. So the next one we're going to talk about, we're going to spin the globe again, and we're going to land in I count this as South America. It's really Cuba. Cuba! Can you say this name?
Mario Carreño.
Did you say that you looked at him before in a class, or was that Diego?
Oh, Mario, yeah, but yes, I actually took a Cuban art class back when I was at UNT. Professor was really pretty, but really dry.
Pretty but dry, huh?
Yeah, but it was fascinating, though, because he's so interested in this, and this was his passion, was Cuban art. So we went through, the whole survey from the indigenous people all the way through to now. That was before the borders had been open, too, and he was actually allowed access in for study, I think. But anyway, Mario Carreño, he was,
he's a surrealist.
He's a surrealist. This is El Azulejo, also known as the Bluebird.
And it's this couple, and it's almost like super deformed anime, between like that and
That's
like a normal figure, like it's kind of just squished. It almost looks like the Attack on Titan Titans.
I'm gonna say it kind of has that weird, almost just off CGI feel to the faces, you know, kind of like Polar Express when it's there but not there.
So it's these bodies that you instantly recognize as human, but once again, there's that level of abstraction there. They are kind of like squashed down into like the essence of what's human. The face has that very like, on the female, has this very like carved quality. She's got this precious pink dress that's kind of working as a wet drapery, and she's holding a bluebird in her hands, whereas next to her, another woman is reaching up into a like bird cage that has this like it's being held by this abstracted tree that's like leafless, even though there's a leaf tree in the background, and it's the rest of the paintings like these very muted browns and blues.
Yeah, and that's gosh, it's been so long. I think it's typical for his artwork.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's kind of the rebellious period they were going through after pick your battle with the church. So that's, I'm sorry, I should have read up more, but
no, it's okay. It says that a lot of these were painted with automobile paint too, which it would make sense that back then it was a muted color.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because he is in Cuba during this period, he's not as well known as a lot of the like Mexican or European surrealists.
Right.
But it still has that very like influenced by De Chirico kind of like dream world abstract quality. And I think I've seen his work before, I just didn't know who it was. It's
Right.
like Diego Rivera, it just kind of ends up in like Mexican restaurants because it's not offensive.
Right.
But for North America, because Mexico is part of North America, I included Diego Rivera for our North American artist.
All right, you go.
Because I struggle with that one. Love you, Mexico. Love you. You are part of North America. I accept you.
How are you struggling if you accept them?
I was raised by racists. I don't know. I try.
I'm patting you on the head. You're just so far away.
So
She really is like an arm length away.
Yeah.
I'm being such a bill. Stop it! There, okay. Sorry, the computer's a little haywire.
So Diego Rivera is a surrealist. This isn't the most surrealist piece, though. It's from a factory in Detroit. Or it's...
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It were these industry murals, and it's people working in these like extremely compressed like machine areas. Like the people are really part of the machine, even though you can see them like outlined in the like center and in certain areas in like these yellow jumpsuits or in bright blue shirts with yellow suspenders. They become this like congealed mass that's intertwined with all of this like press machinery and like large circle wheels and an automobile over top because it's Detroit. And it's
commentary on the Industrial Revolution and how...
Yeah, and then, you know, you got your Marxism in here because
Right.
It's like the man working for the people. And Rivera's very, very, very Marxist.
Well, that's a shocker.
And, you know, it's funny up against a Cuban artist who kind of, like, gets lost to history because communism. So it's interesting, I think, to, like, look at what's going on here. Because, you know, in the 30s we have that Man Ray photograph. In 32 there's that Picasso that's the Cubist piece. And then just 5 years later you have the Carreno that's from 1940, where it's this like much more like simplified surrealist piece, but you also have surrealists that are working like Rivera that are like hyperactive.
It's really fun to see the influence, because Cuba was so even before the embargo, they weren't cut off from everybody, but it wasn't like a cultural hub. So the stuff from Europe came in, but it filtered in slowly, you know? So the wave would come from Europe, and it would filter and it would percolate, kind of in North America, and it'd percolate its way up through Mexico, and then it would hit Cuba. And by then, like, they're so used to, like, owning it as their own and putting their own spin on it. It's actually brilliant. I have to dig my notes up from that class now.
No, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of the way it works, though. Like, a certain region's always going to have a style to it. Like, you can very easily tell the different regional styles of, like, Art Nouveau or Art Deco. Because it's certain areas go off in a certain tangent, because you have the influences of who's there and what they like and what their sensibilities are and what their experiences are.
Which makes sense, because, I mean, even living in different regions but speaking the same language gives you different linguistic diphthongs. And
I once asked a friend that was a Mexican to translate a song in Cuban.
Okay.
And apparently Cuban Spanish is, like, way faster than Mexican Spanish, so they're like, they're just, I can't.
Yeah, oh yeah, no.
It's like, what?
Mexico has different Spanish from Venezuela.
Well, see, I knew that. The dialects are different. Just like, I can barely understand Scottish people sometime. If that's like, if Scots or Irish are real thick brogue, I have no idea what they're saying.
They actually use different words for things too. So Jeff has compared, my husband's fluent in Spanish, but he learned Venezuelan Spanish. He grew up with a friend from Venezuela. So then he speaks to the Mexican workers or to people from other South American countries who speak Spanish, and they'll start comparing different words from stuff. And he went, another anecdote on this, I'm sorry, and then we'll get back to art. He was in a bar in Europe, back in the 80s or early 90s, I'm sure. And he was talking to two girls. One of them was from Australia, and one of them was from Canada, I want to say. And my husband's from Texas. He is, like, he went to A&M type of Texas, so he got the drawl if he wants it.
Mm-hmm. I've heard it.
Oh, God. And not oh God in a good way, I'm sorry.
It's funny when you've heard him in his, like, proper speaking voice, like I have now. Mm-hmm. And then when they backslide into the southern accent, you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, you really are from Texas.
Yeah. So they decided it would be really fun for all of them to speak in their native, like, cadence and colloquialism type thing. So Jeff's got the super hick drawl going on. The Aussie's speaking Aussie, and the Canadian is, like, throwing in random Canadian French just to be a twat. Apparently he also went home with both of them. So
I'm shocked. Your husband, ladies and gentlemen.
I married that.
So, it's funny though, I watched a video today earlier and it was amazing. It was an Australian, like, this kangaroo had attacked his dog and had it, like, gripped, and he, like, walks over and frees his dog and then punches the kangaroo in the face. The kangaroo's like, oh, and the guy just walks off. And my friend's like, what kind of drugs do you have to be on to punch a kangaroo? And I'm like, you don't have to be on drugs, you just have to be Australian.
How to be Australian. Punch a kangaroo!
Every Australian I've known, though, is like, they're a very
mellow.
Let's say tough people. No.
What? They're very tough.
The
I will
only...
give them that.
Yeah, I lived with a Russian. The only person I have ever heard a Russian that's in the military say is crazier than them is the Australian military.
Oh, that's fair.
They're like, we're mad. They're very mad. I feel like Australia and the United States, we get that thing in common. This was the frontier.
Well, and
it takes tough people to settle godforsaken hellholes like Texas or the Australian outback.
Everything is trying to kill you in Australia. That's all I've learned from Australia, is everything is trying to kill you.
I think if you look at, like, rattlesnakes and rabies here, it's not that much better.
Everything is trying to kill you in Australia.
Okay. I have a northern blue-tongue skink who's, like, owning a stoner with a blue tongue, so I'm gonna argue with you, but okay. If that blue tongue doesn't scare you, that's it. That's all he's got. That's it. You scared? No.
Look,
well, I've got these tiny stub legs. I'm gonna try to run.
Poor Atlas.
He
He's
can't
such a
even always
sweetheart.
get traction on them, so they're just in there, like, wiggling back and forth. It's really... It's so... I don't understand how people are scared of those guys, but yeah.
And yes, they're tough, but anywho. Alright, so... But we were on Diego Rivera. Where are we going now?
So, you know what the next place is? Oceania, because I refuse to say Australia. And Australia is not Europe, and Oceania is not Europe. It's kind of like Malaysia is not, like, Asia, and Australia is not Asia, so it's like, they're their own thing. It's okay. Malaysians are not Asians. It's just, you know, you can learn that on Wikipedia, but I'm going to tell it to you so you feel real smart, and I feel extra smart.
How to speak Australian.
So in Indonesia, that's the Papua province, Irian Jaya, and this is Papua New Guinea. At the time, this is like tribal art. This is from the Asmat people. It's carved in wood. It's 45 inches or 114 centimeters tall. And it's a wood sculpture. It kind of reminds me of the baby from Eraserhead.
It looks like a baby mixed with an iguana.
It's like basically like, I think this is like a carved like stick or branch or something that was very thin to start out with. The head is very, very round. It almost looks like a papier-mâché balloon. The eye is slightly carved in with a curve. The nose is like, it's almost non-existent. The mouth is extremely like abstract, almost like something a child would draw. And that's not an insult. There's some artists like Cy Twombly that have spent their whole life trying to draw like children, and it's hard. Because you have to let a lot go.
Yeah.
And the body curves down into this like curled tail at the end, and the feet arch up and meet the elbows in these two triangles that also morph into the tail. And there's these small carvings on like the hands and the arms and against the legs that almost mirror the mouth in their simplicity.
And like there's insets in there that almost look like bone structure in the arms.
Yeah, I think this is supposed to be
leg.
like a lizard or
Right.
a very, very... I'm not sure, though.
I vote chameleon or iguana.
Chameleons actually aren't native to there, and neither are iguanas or South America.
Lizard
Yeah,
type.
it's a lizard. It's a lizard of some sort, probably.
Watch
or a
out
monkey.
for iguana.
This could be a monkey.
No.
I hate you. But this, this is worth mentioning. I couldn't find an Australian or New Zealand painter that really stood out, because this is a harder thing than you think to podcast. But I think it's interesting to look at this primitive art from there, because we explored that part of the world, and when I say we, I mean like Western European sensibility BS, because we're the monstrous god emperors of our own butts. And
I want to be a monstrous god emperor of my own butt. Is that an employment opportunity?
yes, you've gotten a job through the podcast. You can sleep well tonight.
Woohoo!
So this simple level of abstraction is another thing that's coming into Europe, and it's a novel, so it's something everyone is seeing. So for me, that's worth mentioning. It's also part of the Michael Rockefeller collection, who I got to do a podcast on at some point, but I've mentioned before, he disappeared in the wilds, possibly drowned, possibly the natives got him. There's conspiracy theories that think that he lived among the natives. But it's neat to look at, this is where this is in the world. There's still this like very wild point in the 1930s. You still have the chance to like go out and find things that people have never seen before and explore things that people have never explored. We're getting to the end of it, but this is why there's like comic book characters like Dr. Savage, who's going to be getting his own film soon. He was the Bronze Man, whereas like Superman's the Man of Steel, Doc Savage was the Man of Bronze, and he was tanned bronze with blonde hair and super intelligent and did calisthenic exercises so that he was always flexible and had cat-like grace. And he has this group of like fellow like dude guy explorers that all went out into the woods and like did dude guy things. And
is it like dude bro things?
yeah, and then they find like underground like lizardmen cities, and dinosaur places or an ancient artifact that exists in the untamed wilds of Malaysia. That,
so, like the Savage Land from X-Men?
I wonder why it's named the Savage Land. Is it like after Doc Savage? Do you think? Do you think that's a nod?
I'm just saying, it was the Savage Land. There were dinosaurs.
Yes, it's a nod to like that guy in that era of like
there were
pulp sci-fi and comic books where the adventure comics are still real big. This is a thing in the 1930s because there are still these places that seem, quote, tribal and primitive and wild.
The dinosaurs can talk.
They can?
No.
I'm so proud of you for how happy you are about this, because it really just kind of makes me happy in return to see your smiling little horrible transparent ginger face. So when our final, because like everybody's sick of our BS at this point, hopefully you've learned a little bit and you're getting an idea for what the world looked like in the 1930s. And this is the like point where the American stock market has collapsed, the Dust Bowl is starting, flappers are kind of like falling away because people can't afford to live like that anymore.
World War I is starting to kind of fade from people's consciousness. Not wholly, but...
Yeah, I mean, those guys are getting up into their like 30s and 40s at this point.
Right, and World War II is...
looming on the horizon. Hitler's become Chancellor of Germany, but he hasn't started executing tons of people yet. They are starting their anti-Semitic propaganda. Japan's pissing off China.
Again.
As you do. As you do. Speaking of China, of course, Asia's the last one we're going to mention. Asia was really hard as well, because what happens at this point is, once again, communism. You got your, like, period where people are making very traditional art because China exists under an emperor. And then you have the communist revolution. And then you have people that either stay there and make art for the glorious leader Mao Zedong, and it stays like traditional but not traditional and kind of Russian propaganda-y, or you have the people that get the F out and start making some beautiful like work that's competitive with like the American abstract expressionists and stuff. There's one I'm going to actually cover. And I might cover this guy if any of these pieces sound particularly interesting or you want to know more. Let us know. ArtIswear@gmail.com.
You need to talk.
Or Facebook. Or like us on YouTube. Or like us on SoundCloud. Or like us on iTunes.
Talk about the art. We'll self-promote after the art.
I'm sorry, Mommy.
I have a schedule to keep.
So in Shanghai, there's Zhang Dequine, or also known as Chang Dechen. This is China.
Daiqian, I think.
Daiqian.
Sorry if
we're Hicks.
Yeah.
China's gonna declare war on us.
Not wrong.
So this is an early painting for him. It's from the 1930s. It's that brush style that you do with Buddhism where you wake up and you kind of practice painting and it's this like loose stuff. The calligraphy is on one side and it takes up about a third. Then the other 2/3 is a bundle of these kind of plum colored blossoms that are a loose watercolor, and there's no outline around everything. And I'm betting it's a character that's hidden in the knot is just like the black ink tying up the bundle of flowers.
Right.
It's still very simple, especially compared to Western art.
But the color play is just beautiful.
It really is, but
because
it's still
that
also
watercolor like flow to it.
But because of what it is, this is very traditional Chinese painting.
Right.
You can see that he's playing with how minimal it can be and how it relates to the shape of the cuneiform writing to the side. So this Chinese work, like I said, later it's going to morph and become more like abstract expressionist. This piece is interesting, though, when you compare it back to like the Rivera and the Picasso, where they have not become so abstract that they're minimal. They become so abstract that it's really busy. And, like, especially Picasso later does become more, like, minimal and broad areas of color. He's even kind of doing that at this period. But I also feel like that this Chinese piece plays well with the Crayonno from Cuba, because it's that, you know, it's a very limited, like, pastel kind of palette that has a, like, delicate sensibility to the color. So you can tell that these things are all kind of working off of each other.
Right.
Hopefully this gives you a better glimpse at what circa 1935 kind of looked like in the art world, and how we're all kind of looking at each other at all points in the history of art, but especially after we industrialize and get things like radio.
And movies.
RKO.
All right. Welcome to the radio. So yeah, once again, the Christmas thing still going on. Send us your addresses in a name. ArtIswear@gmail.com. Now you can self-promote.
Facebook. Leave us a comment. If you leave us a comment on iTunes or YouTube, I love you and try to respond if I can. We look forward to seeing your reviews on iTunes or SoundCloud or wherever you would choose to leave a review. That actually really does help us. Tell a friend. We're broke. We ain't promoting this. It's you. I'm promoting me. Seriously. Jobs for the public. Not that I'm panicking, but I just took my medicine mid-podcast because I'm panicking. Katie will be okay. I'll feed her on food I carve out of her back deck. She'll never know. I'll just put ketchup on it and some vitamins. Will they have electrolytes? Everything needs electrolytes. The plants have to have electrolytes. Yeah. Electrolytes are the best. We need electrolytes to live. Yes. All right, so this has been a very random and around-the-worldy episode of Art I Swear. I'm Vanessa Van Alstine. I'm Katie Gibbs. And you guys have a creative day. Art I Swear has intro and outro by Joe Giggs. Joe Giggs is a worldwide awesome DJ man. Schedule him for your next party. Art I Swear takes all samples from Conan's Iridile Project. If you want to learn about number stations and hear some creepy recordings like they've been showing in horror movies recently because they occasionally pay attention to the medias, check out Conan's Iridile Project. www.artiswear.com. ArtIswear@gmail.com. Bye. Bye!